Eleanor Roosevelt wrote, "Success includes two things: the development of an individual to his utmost potential and a contribution of some kind to one's world." Hello, I'm Kerryn Powell, the Network Catalyst, and today I'm going to have a conversation with Brent Edwards. Now, Brent is my first international guest, and we met during lockdown. We connected on LinkedIn, and then because I moved my events to online, Brent arrived from Toronto at one of those events. And we quickly found that we share very similar interests in helping people to build their network and relationships. Brent is the founder of BrentCanada Experiences and a professional networking advisor to new immigrants in Canada. Development experience in the Greater Toronto Area, Brent thrives on building relationships with economic stakeholders across a broad range of industries and markets. The uniqueness of each business fuels his abundant curiosity, and he has a talent for connecting people and commercial opportunities. His passion is coaching newcomer entrepreneurs and job seekers on how to improve their professional networking skills so they can reach their potential in Canada. Welcome, Brent.
To see you again. It's been a while.
It's very nice to see you. I was actually just starting to record a little bit and explaining how we met first on LinkedIn, and then a problem became an opportunity with COVID, and we got to have a conversation when you came to a YTM event. So it's.
I've been singing your praises a few times, where people have talked about examples of international networking and how kind you were to readjust the time for your event. It's been people will say, "Oh, give me a good example of where networking during COVID has been beneficial for you." So your name has come up a few times.
Yours has in my world as well. So
wonderful. Thank you. You're very kind.
Wonderful how things evolve over time.
There we go.
Are you still in lockdown?
Yeah, well, it depends what province you're in, but that's how we do things in Canada. Madly off in your own direction kind of thing. But as a country, we've really pulled together. There hasn't been a lot of disharmony, which, does crop up in our 10 provinces and 3 territories every once in a while. But so in Ontario, we have a stay-at-home order. So unless you're going grocery shopping or going to work at, as a registered nurse in a COVID hospital like my wife is, you pretty much need to stay at home. So I've pretty much been doing that. My son has. My daughter's going to school in Montreal, in Quebec, and they have a curfew instead. So they're kind of following the direction from France. So France went the curfew route. So if it's after 8 o'clock at night and 5 a.m, you got to be inside.
So I was actually just thinking this wasn't part of our conversational plan, but this is a really important part of networking, because just that sharing of, normal everyday chat is what brings people and binds them together. And I think that's really important. So when people come to YTM events, yes, we use a set of cards that I created, and those cards get you to talk about all sorts of things. And in fact, you could be dealt the card, "Why do you do what you do?" And tell me a bit about that.
Good question. It's been a bit of a journey to get here. But really what I do, I'm a very patriotic Canadian. I want to see my country succeed. And one of the greatest benefits we have is we have a lot of newcomers coming to the country. And I've been a newcomer with my own country because I grew up on the West Coast in Vancouver, moved to Toronto, didn't know anyone. I know how difficult it is when you're moving to a place and don't know anyone, especially if you're in business and need to build those relationships. So after doing some volunteer work with the Institute for Canadian Citizenship, helping to organize citizenship ceremonies for new Canadians, doing some work with the Toronto Immigrant Economic Employment Council, doing mentoring, I realized that the number one issue for new Canadians, the biggest challenge for them rebuilding their career in Canada, is a lack of professional network. And since I've spent 30 years in marketing, sales, business development, product management, I realized that this was an area that I could assist them with. And that's one of the reasons I started BrentCanada Experiences.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I have a similar feeling about helping business owners because, it's like a whole new world. Particularly, we have a lot of business owners that come to our events because they've perhaps worked for a bigger company and now they're out in their own world. And my background of helping international people move into Melbourne, I could see that it is a struggle. In fact, I only moved from one side of the city to the other and needed to build a whole new network. So I think it's really, and I believe it's a life skill, not just a business skill.
But you've also talked about your family and how your father was a small business owner and in the RV business, and yeah, so I mean it's something you've grown up with and you've got experience to share. So that's
Absolutely,
something you need to be
absolutely.
able to do.
Yeah, and my teaching experience never expected to be teaching people how to network, but I absolutely love it. And I'm like you, I'm curious. I'm really curious about what people do and why they do it. So, stepping back a bit, tell us a little bit about your career now, or your career journey through those 30 years.
Oh, sure. Okay, so I'll try to do it in less than a couple of minutes. um, so interesting. So coming out of university, I studied marketing in British Columbia, and I wanted to do one of two things. I wanted to either work in the hotel industry and the travel industry, or I wanted to work in public relations. So I actually uh, came out of university. There really weren't many jobs. There was one of the recessions back in the 80s. Um, got briefly in the hotel business. Then I made the decision I needed to move to Toronto. So Toronto is, the financial center of Canada. It's the biggest industrial city. And especially if you're in marketing, it's really where a lot of the jobs were, not necessarily in Vancouver. So I moved. I was able to find a job through pounding the payment for a month. Moved to Toronto and then had a career in the travel industry and had the benefits of working with Thomas Cook and American Express, product management. And then my jobs basically got kind of globalized and changed, and I took a different tact and went into consumer banking for a year. Got reorged out of that role with a merger and acquisition, like many people have. Went into market research. Really enjoyed that, working with 40 different countries, including our franchise owner in Australia. Then had another reorg. So I've kind of been through this reorg process and have had to reinvent myself several times. My full-time job now, I'm in business development, but a lot of the work we do is with public relations. So in some ways, it's this circuitous route that I've ended up working in the travel industry when it was booming, when it was the time to be in, because it's not the time now. And now I've worked in public relations, which is something else I want to be at the beginning. So it's just, I ended up at the destinations, just not how I expected to get there.
But I think that's the way it is. And, with me, as you know, I started off in the travel industry as well. So when I actually look back and connect dots, I've been helping people find solutions and the way to their pathway and,
Yes.
always. So I think people undervalue that. And I think that's a great thing about networking is when you have conversations like this, it doesn't have to be just about business itself. It can be about that sharing of knowledge and life experience and connections. So I think it's really important.
For sure. And I think that whole connecting dots, we look at people's career and says, oh, of course you're doing what you're doing because they've connected the dots forward, when in reality, that's not necessarily how it happened at all.
No.
So but it's these conversations to uncover that and understand the opportunities people have can lead to big things.
So what top three things have you learnt about being in business in all those different industries and along your pathway?
Oh, top three things about business. Relationships matter. Relationships matter a tremendous amount. It's really important to build your relationships outside of your current environment, your current work environment. Yes, you want to have good working relationships, but I've learned from going through, the impact after 9/11, after the financial crisis, now with COVID, um, dramatic things can happen, and you need to some advice I give to newcomers is around diversifying your portfolio of connections. So look at your relationships in some ways like a stock or an investment portfolio, and you want to be invested in these different industry sectors. And also, I think another learning would be, yes, you want to be focused, but there's so much opportunities can come from being meeting with people who are very different than yourself,
Yes.
especially if they are like small business people are amazing at networking. It's their lifeblood, especially in referral based businesses. So I really hadn't had a lot of connections with small business people before, but I'm learning so much from them. So those are a couple of areas I would say in terms of business. And the advice from my father: think ahead.
Mm.
That was his motto. Was always, think like a chess player. Think he wasn't a chess player. He was an engineer. Ignore the advice of professional engineers at your peril, but think ahead. Think ahead
Yes.
in terms of the relationship and where you can help people, what you can do, give back. The more you give back, the more things will come back to you. You don't know when, but it will.
I'm just such a firm believer about that. And bringing my children up, I used to always think about the consequence. And I think that's the same thing. What's the consequence of that connection that you made or that helping that person? Not that you go into it with I've got to get something back attitude. I think that's really the wrong way. But that opportunity of, this could turn out to be something and a conversation that I have something opened up to me that I never expected before. Like this, I didn't know
Exactly.
when I met you
Oh,
last year
no.
in lockdown, I didn't know we would now be
but
doing a
but
podcast. In fact,
but
I
we
didn't
said
have
at
a
some point,
podcast.
sure, very- well, we said at some point it's like we could do something together. Who knew it was going to be tonight, right?
Exactly.
And I would say there's a Supertramp song. There's Roger Hudson's one of my favorite singers. He comes to Toronto every year. Hide in your shell. That was kind of my theme song when I was looking for work. Is just put yourself out there. It's almost like the uh, improvised when during improv and with comedians. The whole thing with the skit. The reason it works is that each peer person who's on stage says yes to what the other person says. So it's the willingness to say yes and leap at things because you never know, like today's podcast, who it
Absolutely.
will, what will happen.
Absolutely. I was involved in a research project once for someone about career transition, and it asked questions like, would you drive a truck? Would you be a fireman? Would you be and basically I answered yes to lots of them because I thought, well, it's not for life. Not
Yep,
saying I would do it
yep,
for life,
yep.
but if I had to, then I would
Hmm.
give it a go because that's what I have
Yep.
to do. The funny thing was it came out that I would make a very good ventriloquist or a magistrate. so not that I would be perfect for those, but that I shared um, similar qualities, and I guess I am pretty fair in the way that I think. So as you know, this podcast is about connection and contribution and community. So
Yes.
what's your definition? And I understand contribution, but what's your definition of community?
So I think my definition has changed in the last, let's see, COVID's been on since March. So, the last 11 or so months. My definition of community is probably pretty broad because I really look at anyone who's within Canada as part of my community. I think it's because I've spent time in every single province. I know the country pretty well. Um, and so, and also my family's kind of stretched out across the country. So it's pretty broad definition of community versus someone who might say, so ourselves. I was at a networking event yesterday morning in Ireland, virtually. I go to there's a networking group in Boston that I go to once in a while. So my concept of community is really in terms of people finding common cause, and then the work I do with newcomers. The
Mm.
newcomers have chosen Canada. They've come here. They've moved in a lot of cases halfway around the world, and I want them to feel part of the community. And I think that's an interesting way of putting it, Kerryn, that's really what I want them to feel. And I want to help them with understanding Canadian business culture and networking in business. So they feel part of the community, they feel engaged, and it's going to make them more successful because they're going to feel not fish out of water, but really part of the broader community.
Yeah, I think, and that support, for me, it's a really big thing about supporting people so that they don't feel alone and that they have some pathways to find what they need. And of course, those relationships that we build need nurturing along the way. And sometimes, if a relationship is one way, it makes it very difficult to keep that relationship going. So I think relationships are something that needs to be nurtured and be aware that they take time, and it can take a lot of nurturing, but it pays off in big time. So
Yes.
When you're building relationships and nurturing your relationships, you've sent me some excellent articles on LinkedIn, and we've exchanged blogs and things like that and connections. How else do you nurture your relationships?
Well, I think you kind of look at the relationships. There's one of the networkers I've connected with uses the example of like a bank account, that you need to put a lot of deposits into the account before you make any withdrawals. So I think a lot of that's the nurturing component. So in terms of people that I've learned from around nurturing, like my wife is incredible with building relationships. She has relationships with girls that she went to elementary school with, and that's something that I really needed to work on my skills. So I've learned a lot by watching her and how she builds and nurtures relationships. Some of my colleagues, there's one colleague in particular who I've learned from, Laura Pacheco, and she actually, I'd worked with her years ago at Thomas Cook. She was very good at pulling people together for alumni events. And then she went like the next step, and I was out of work. I remember meeting with her. She took me to lunch, and she said, "Look, here's a spreadsheet of all my contacts. Let me know who you want me to introduce you to." And just that willingness to help. As it turned out, one of the people I had a conversation with, it went well. 2 months later, they posted a job. I went back to the same contact Laura had introduced me to, and I ended up getting the job. It's like, but it's that willing. And then she's also come out to my in-person events and assisted and helped. And she is phenomenal at networking. It's her expertise is in finance and but that's something I learned to. And I guess it's this willingness to be the first one to um, send something, be the first one to comment, provide value. That's really what it's all about.
Mm.
Be a generous networker.
Yes, they actually don't quote me on the statistics or whatever, but one of my other podcast interviews was with Peter Dempsey, and he actually had a conversation with me about that men and women have different amount of neurons, and that's why women actually are very good networkers, because they are higher on that scale of whatever it is in the brain than a male. And that's also why I run events that are for men and women, because there's so much value to network together,
Yes.
because men have a different outlook on life, a different outlook on business. They can be a lot
Yeah.
more cut through. Once again, I'm being general, but I think that
Mm-hmm.
men can also learn by not going straight to what car do you drive and what's your position, but getting to build a personal relationship and get to know a bit about the person before they get to talk business.
Okay.
So I think
And
that's really important.
that's where I see this. That's what it's uh, men and women. It's like the newcomers and new Canadian established Canadians. There's so much they could learn from each other about global business and about doing business in Canada. And I want to find a way to bring more of them together, because I think they could learn so much from each other.
Absolutely. And I think, I hope that people can reframe this and know that it's not just Canada and not just Australia. This is a life skill. This is how people build networks for business and for life. And when they can connect and when they can contribute to the well-being of somebody else, then we get this lovely community thing that can make such an impact on the world and on others.
Absolutely. And so, fulfilling as well for
Mm.
being able to help.
Yes. So what are your three favorite ways of nurturing a relationship?
I would say working with LinkedIn is providing, in terms of commentary and encouraging from a distance. There's so many things that uh, you can do that are free.
Mm.
But I think it's being one of the first ones to provide support. So whether someone's starting a new business, someone's starting a blog, it's being there and cheerleading from the side. I think
Mhm.
that can make a difference. Um, I think also taking the impetus to be the one to follow up. So follow up is so important in networking, but you're the one. The follow up is up to you, and if you're not following up, then you shouldn't be pointing fingers and saying, "Why haven't they followed up with me?" It's like you're the one that needs to follow up. And I think the other thing would be trying to find ways that you can connect others. So I think a lot of people, their default is they see differences, and I think my default DNA is to find similarities, which is kind of interesting. It's a different way of thinking than most people I've met. But I really like this matchmaking in terms of finding people who could help each other out and introducing them. I really enjoy doing that, and it's led to some interesting conversations and feedback. It's interesting. So I was in I was in one high school play, and in grade 12, very small role. I was a cab man. The play I was in was the matchmaker. So I don't know, which
There you,
became which became Hello Dolly, which supposedly was a big hit the year I was born, according to my mom. So
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
There
I know.
might
Well,
be
there you
something
are. I'm a
there.
ventriloquist and you're a matchmaker. So what? so
Oh yeah.
so we love to start conversations, and I know a lot of people, when they go networking, they can find it very awkward to walk into a room where there are strangers and they're not sure
Yeah.
of anything.
Yeah.
What's the first question you use when you meet somebody new?
So so it's interesting to bring it up because one of the challenges a lot of the newcomers that I work with, who are originally from overseas to Canada, is small talk is a challenge for them,
Mm.
because small talk is something in some of these cultures you do after you do the business. But of course, in our case, it's something, Canada, Australia, you tend to use it to start the conversation. So the question it's more a question I avoid asking. I don't ask people where they're from,
Hmm.
especially in Canada, probably the same in Australia, because it's such a double double-edged question. It's like, where am I from? Are you asking my what country I'm from, my ethnicity? Like, so you want to stay away from that.
Mm.
So I will usually ask something about, um, how do you know the hosts? Do you know any, like, how long have you been in the city for? Or what brings you to the city? And that way people can say, or even, do you know who else do you know in the city? And they'll say, like, well, I'm here with my wife. My brother is here. I'm staying with my uncle. So and everyone has a connection around family.
Hmm.
If they don't, then it also opens up an opportunity. But it's this question about not where are you from or what do you do, because those are very close-ended. They shut down conversations, and you're an expert at this, Kerryn.
I
You know
totally agree with you. I
questions.
totally agree.
Exactly. So it's opening up, and it's all about finding common ground. It's about finding areas of common interest. And I think one of the things my um, curiosity is, because I've lived so many parts in the country, the odds are if someone mentions a place, I've either been there or know something about it, or
Yes.
visited. So I can springboard the conversation from there. But that works for me. Other people might want to do something different.
I think it's so important. The question that I don't like at all is, what do you do? I find that very sort of quite a judgmental question, is about whether you're worth talking to or not. So if I'm going to use a question like that, I'll tend to say, so what have you been working on today, if it's that sort of
Yes.
environment? Or,
Yes.
I always try to build rapport first. And just like you, what brought you to this event? Or have you been to
Yes.
this event before? They're much more open
Yes.
questions.
You're trying to find something that you've got in common that will bring the conversation forward. The example I'll use, and I know we're speaking to your audience in the state of Victoria, and you probably will get this analogy a bit. So this isn't Aussie rules football. This is Canadian football, gridiron football. So it's all about moving the ball down the field. So even if you're in rugby, right, it's all about you're trying to move the ball down the field to get a touchdown or to get a try, right? So it's what can you do to advance the conversation a bit, right? It's just, and that's those questions are to advance the conversation. So eventually you can all score.
Excellent. So you may get this question if you were playing cards at YTM. What do you do to relax?
What do I do to relax? Well, there's a lot of time to relax. Um, so I guess so my passion project is really that is kind of what I'm focusing my extra energy on. I've got a house full of my son's studying, my wife's studying a course, my daughter's in Montreal studying, but I'm working on my passion project, which is the newcomers. I do have a full-time work, but this connecting with people and doing networking events, and that's kind of what I'm doing to relax, because maybe it's because I'm an extrovert, but I get energized by being with people. And right now, because of COVID, we can't get out. It's we have to stay at home
Yes.
in my part of the country. So that's the way I connect with people and get energy is
We are
by
so
being with
alike.
people.
So the very last question is,
Sure.
what do you hope to do that you've never done before?
So I hope to do that I've never done before.
Mm.
I would say for me, there's places I want to go. My wife and I love traveling. The border's been closed to the US for a while. The thing that she keeps saying that I need to do is to come to Australia, because she had a brother that lived in Australia. She was there when she was around 11 or 12, talked about how beautiful it was. And yeah, I need to come to Australia. That's what
Yeah, let's
that's
hope.
what,
Let's
that's what
hope
I need
we
to
can be
do.
traveling sooner rather than later. But at the moment, the thing is about keeping safe. So, Brent, to finish off, have you got a favourite quote?
Yes, I've got a quote, just sticking with kind of the theme. It's from a gentleman named Tariq Haddad. So I'll read it to you, and then I'll explain why it's important. So he said, and this is kind of a life quote from him, is no one can go back and start a new beginning, but everyone can start today and make a new ending. So Tariq Haddad is the CEO and founder of a chocolate company in Antigonish, Nova Scotia called Peace by Chocolate. His family came to Canada in 2015 as Syrian refugees. They had a chocolate factory in, I believe it was Damascus, that was destroyed during the Civil War. So they had nothing when they came to Canada. When they came to Antigonish, they were welcomed by the community. It's a small university town in Nova Scotia. And they were actually given a shed to start making chocolate, because that's what they knew. Their dad had a chocolate factory for years. What he has done is he now employs 55 Canadians. They are now one of the top 5 chocolate factories in Canada. And he's now taken out Canadian citizenship, and they sell across Canada. And it's an example of building and figuring out who your community is, and giving back. They've been very generous in terms of creating jobs and giving back to the newcomer community. I really look up to him, and I think it really says, like, forget about what happened yesterday. I know that you had quoted Eleanor Roosevelt, I believe, off the top.
Yes.
And another quote of hers is, yesterday is history. Today, today is a gift, and I think, or today's a gift, and tomorrow's a mystery. So it's like, yes, just because this is what got you here doesn't mean it's going to bring you forward, but you need to keep looking forward, and that's inspiring in terms of building community and giving back.
Wonderful. So thank you for connecting with me. Thank you for contributing to this podcast. And I look forward to helping us build community together and helping people to feel supported wherever they may be. Thank you, Brent.
Kerryn, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for making the connection.
You've been listening to Conversations to Amplify and Inspire with Kerryn Powell. Let's make our conversations count so we can better connect, contribute, and build community. If you want to find genuine access points to team up with your ideal client or strategic allies, perhaps I can help.